I still cannot get feedback on the.
Can you turn this down? It's going to blow our minds out.
Okay.
Should I really be hearing myself?
She wants us to.
Well, it's fine now.
From here.
I hear you without this now.
Everyone there.
I turned
So
this
you don't
off.
have to go
Yes.
around.
So why do I need to wear it?
Yeah, just stay here. It's better from here. So
Is there a
Is there a
technical
reason?
reason
Yeah,
why
exactly.
I
Can you
need it?
explain
What
that?
is the reason?
So that when your mic is not working, if you
what is going on? Like, I see like this.
When-
Can I just? Are you uncomfortable with that?
Yeah, I am.
Yeah,
Yeah,
don't
don't
worry.
worry.
If we can't hear you, we'll let you know
If-
we can't hear
Yeah,
you.
if the mic's, I mean, it's uncomfortable because it's going to affect with the thinking process.
Yeah.
do you know what mic that is?
Yes. Third one.
So
I reduced it.
yeah,
Third one
probably
to the lowest.
from here.
So
Then
you can
But
use
can't
it.
I see the microphone there working on that?
You can see the wave.
Yeah, that's enough, isn't it? Microphone's not
Okay.
working. Yeah, but you will know when it's not working.
Yes, I will.
Very good.
Starting now. Okay.
I will also. So it's how we put it. That's very cool. And that one too.
Hello everyone, my name is Cynthia and today we are having a discussion in the studio this afternoon. Of course, it's the anti-racism campaign week led by Dami, who is the Black Student Officer, and we decided to have a campaign conversation around the Bradford 12. How did this happen? Where are we now, and where are we looking forward to be? Of course, I'm joined in the studio today by Dami, who is the Black Student Officer of the University of Bradford. Hi, Dami.
Hi, Cynthia.
Can you introduce yourself?
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Dami, and I am the current Black Students Officer of the University of Bradford, and I'm chairing this campaign for Anti-Racism Festival. And just quick summary of why we're doing this, because a lot of people have been asking me why we're doing this now,
Okay.
and just basically to bring awareness to what's going on, in the country that we're in. I represent Black students on campus, and I hear a lot of reports about microaggression, unconscious bias, and a lot of people don't even recognize when it happens. So the question is, and to be honest, I don't like to throw the word racism around that much because, like, I was speaking to a couple of students the other day, like, there's always a difference. And, even though sometimes the microaggression leads up to racism, it's always nice to identify when it's happening, most importantly. We're having a conversation here the other day, I don't know if you remember, and they were saying things like, someone touching your hair without asking you is a form of microaggression. And depends on where and when. If I touch your hair right, I think if I touch Ikra's hair right, if Ikra touches my hair right now, I have a relationship with Ikra.
It's cool.
So it's different. So like this, just the awareness basically for people to understand. Okay, this is what this is. This is what that is, and also to educate people who are at the other end of this, aggression, to understand. Okay, this is how we feel about it. This is what we would rather we do differently moving forward. That's also what we're doing basically, the awareness.
Amazing. And of course, the balance.
Yeah,
Very important.
definitely striking the balance.
And Ikra is in the studio. Ikra is the education officer of the University of Bradford. I literally dragged Ikra to be in this conversation. Hi, Ikra. How you doing?
Hi everyone, I'm good. So I'm Ikra Tabassum. I am the education officer at the union, and I feel like Dami's pretty much said it all.
Sure.
We feel like it's a good time to have these conversations. It has been some microaggression around, and we just want to make sure we kind of stamp that out as soon as possible.
Of course, we were joined in the studio today by Tariq Mehmood Ali. He is an associate professor at the American University Beirut. He has had his PhD at the Lancaster University. Tariq was first known by his first novel, Hands on the Sun, which a lot of people don't know that you wrote this while you were in prison. Yes,
You can say it. It's
okay. Hands on the Sun dealt with the experience of the resistance to racism by young migrants to the United Kingdom in the 1970s and 1980s. He has since then written several novels like While There Is Light, You're Not Proper, The Song of Gozarina, which is said it already has a new
It's in process of
Oh,
being
okay.
republished.
And many other books in the works. He's also a filmmaker and a co-director of the award-winning documentary film Injustice. Tariq is joining us today on the conversation, the history of racism in Bradford for the anti-racism campaign. It's good to have you in the studio this afternoon.
Thank you. It's quite an emotional journey back to the University of Bradford, and it's an honor to be here.
I remember Ika and I asking you before the interview that when was the last time you got close to the university, and you gave us a very emotional scenario. What really happened?
It's a long story, but going back into the 70s, when I first brushed with the law, so to speak, started off for being arrested for attempted murder at Bradford, an incident related to Bradford College, which had nothing to do with me. But I was about to sign a statement when they came in and said, well, we found the people who did it, but you can't go home because you're going to complain about being held up here. And of course, I was slapped around a few times in the police station. But then I got charged for stealing cups and plates from Bradford University, which I didn't do either.
There's been so many experiences about racism, unfortunately, in Bradford. Can you tell us about the history of Bradford? What do you know exactly about it?
I think that, when we come into this country, we come into this country because of a legacy of racism. The legacy of racism and colonialism can't be separated.
Sure.
I came into this country because they came over there, over where I'm from. And when they came to where I'm from, they didn't come with visas, they came on guns and tanks. In fact, I would not be sitting in front of you today had they not colonized and captured Kashmir, because they sold my ancestors in 1846 for £300,000. And our forced migration, in a sense, begins around about 1890, where we are chased out of our ancestral lands because we are sold as people, we are sold as cattle, our lands are sold, our animals are sold, and we end up taking refuge in what was then British India, which then becomes Pakistan. And somewhere along the line, I ended up in Bradford. So in a sense, the idea that racism is something about being slapped in the face because you have a different color of skin, well, that's true. Or because I remember kids rubbing my face to see if the dirt came off, i.e. my skin color was different. But racism is also an integral component of the development of this country, and in fact Western Europe and America, and it's equivalently responsible for our underdevelopment. The wealth here and our poverty from where we come are not two separate, unconnected processes. And they, in my experience, so when we come over to this country, we come over to a devastated landscape of Europe. They've just had a war, the Second World War. They recruited us to do the dirty, disgusting jobs which white workers would not do. We ended up living in ghettos not because we did not wish to live with white people as neighbors. They moved out. We never moved out in that sense. So in one sense, the racism was all prevalent in the economic process. We can go into more details shortly. It was also prevalent in the educational system in this country, where, as you know, you mentioned about the busing that the Bradford University is doing. There's a wonderful exhibition still on at Bradford University. You should, those who haven't seen it, should.
It's a stimulation of what happened, and I feel like that's when I first heard about your name. I was really moved when I watched it. A 15-minute skit. It's happening in a gallery tour anyway, at the university, and pretty much when you watch that video, you start to feel the sense or feel what you went through at that time. And that's what's leading me to my next question. How was life for you at that time? How was life growing up?
The overriding memory that I have is of violence. Violence at the junior school. Now imagine today if you the somebody said white children can't come to this school because they lower the standard of education. That's what they did to us. I didn't know actually until Bradford University. Somebody from here knocked on my door, and it's not very long ago, then to interview me on the busing generation. I didn't realize I had Shabina. I didn't realize that actually I had no normal education in this city. Of when I came here, my education was because they believed too many non-white children, i.e., black children, would lower the educational standards, so they bust us out into other places, which were predominantly white schools, and they were terribly violent to us. But there were two types of violence. There is the violence of the playground, and there is the violence of the educational system itself. Okay? Because if you teach us that Queen Victoria and Britain, what a wonderful empire it was, how we gave the world what we did, how grateful you should be to be here, you are violently suppressing my history. And in a sense, the history of the colonized, because they don't teach us anything. Jesus Christ's image, which we had all around the school, he could have been the father of the white boys who beat me up. I did not recognize Jesus as the blonde-haired, blue-eyed man with a beard. I don't know what I thought of Jesus. I thought he was an Arab. He certainly was not a white man, but that's the Jesus we saw. In our school, I went to Latop Junior School here, and one of my memories from that time, which still causes me pain, is that because I was so heavily beaten up every day, but the violence doesn't stop at the school. Then our parents who had just come over here, in my case, my uncles, all of the migrants who come, we didn't exactly have loads of money before we came to this country. They were indebted to people who bought the tickets for them. So in one sense, all of us who made it here as migrants were lower middle class from those societies. But here we were declassed completely. Because if you had no shoes to wear, if you had no food to eat, if you had no nothing, you can't come to Britain, even if you try to walk it here. And I know people who walked it here. Even then, you need some elementary economic position.
As it is now, to be honest.
Well,
I was
now
going to say that's still pretty much the
it's
same.
appalling at the moment.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
really,
It's
we'll come on to
crazy.
that. So the violence then was also because of the way that the generation before us was made to work. They were physically, often in cases in mills, slapped by white overlookers. Our workers worked the night shifts. White workers worked the day shifts. And the violence was physically and psychologically and was constantly in trouble at school. But what did we think of white people? This is not, I learned eventually that actually my problem may have something to do with my skin color, but the issue is far deeper, far more than skin deep. It goes in not only into history, but it's a complex series of paradigms they've built in front of us, which we sometimes have to deconstruct. So the issue, it would take me a long time to learn, was not about white people, but whiteness. So when I came here, I thought white people were omniscient. Some of them could speak my language. They were pretty because whiteness was pretty, and so on. And actually, I didn't even believe they felt pain like I did for being beaten up. And one day I accidentally raised my hand because a white boy was beating me up. And I hit him on the nose. He bled. And I thought, shit, white people bleed. And that lesson, I became so violent. They lifted me off him, two teachers. Had they not, God knows what I would have ended up doing, because it was the first time I realized that actually they don't like pain, just like I don't like pain.
Nobody likes me.
But I didn't know. I was very young.
Wow.
And at that time, So when we learned that lesson, but the other lesson was you get nothing by crying, nothing by running away. You have to fight for your corner on the playground, but we also had to fight for our corner in the classroom. So they would put people like me who spoke English eventually when we got to the comprehensive schools, but they still put us into English learning classes. It was so absurd. I once had to ask my uncle to come to my school to tell the head
I
teacher
understand English.
that he speaks
It's
English,
what's still the same here.
and I was interpreting for my uncle for the teacher. And it was so ridiculous. So in a sense, that also is violence. It's
True.
violence endemic within the system that can take your humanity away. Not to mention the intense violence
I
of
totally
the
understand. I
playground.
totally understand you, Tariq. And a lot of people don't know this, but you went to prison at a very young age. Some other people, was it? Is it because you were not able? Did you get a defense lawyer? Because part of the things I read about you, was that you defended yourself,
I
Yes.
and
did.
every other person got like a different. That's Gary's Pierce.
Yes, yes.
Um,
You will have to set the thing up, otherwise people won't understand
okay,
the logic of what
let's
the
start from.
meaning of your question is. A very good question, but it won't make sense if I give an answer, because the contextualization of the 70s and 80s leading to our arrest. I did go to prison. We in a case known as the Bradford 12,
Yeah.
but it's better to understand first what the case is and how it's born. This is the era of Paki bashing. This is the era of Margaret Thatcher has come into power. This is an era of the Soviet occupation of Afghanistan. The British intelligence are reporting recruiting young Muslims from here to go fight in Afghanistan. I know this because some of my friends went. Some never came back. Others got injured, and some are still alive. So there is an historical era of a rising fascist movement in Britain. This is a time of the New Cross massacre, where black kids are burnt to death in a party. This is a time where people had buckets outside their letterboxes, not knowing that petrol and water aren't going to work very well. This is a time when being white kids got drunk and came out in their hordes to go paki bashing.
Okay.
And who is a Paki? It doesn't matter whether you're West Indian, you're Caribbean, you're Indian, you're Bengali, you're Kashmiri, South Asian, East Asian, it's irrelevant. We are all brushed by a common tarnished brush of racism. And so in this period, we had heard Bradford was about to be attacked by skinheads. Now, skinheads had been attacking cities. They had attacked Southall.
Oh.
There had been murders as far as May in Coventry, and in fact in Bradford as well.
Oh.
This is an era in which the police said they've never heard of racist violence. This is also an era in which we have understood that when they recruited our ancestors, they said, "Come to Britain, the streets are paved with gold." Well, where we lived, it was dog shit. Really, they were dirty. However, the metaphoric gold, it's true. In relative to where we come from, the poverty of our societies, this was covered in gold. But who did that gold belong to,
So,
and how did they get it? Were they doing us a favor to come to this country? No. We built their industries. The very
yes.
industry in this city where we sit was one of the richest top 10 in the world, or something like that. Not very long ago, historically speaking. But where did its wealth come from? Its wealth came from theft, from plunder, just like the wealth of this country came. So, in that sense,
So the skinheads were going to attack Bradford.
skinheads were going to attack Bradford. But why were skinheads attacking Bradford? This was the rise of a fascist movement, then led by the National Front, the British movement, and so on. And we said they will not attack our communities. It was as simple as that. And we armed ourselves, but we were also part of an organization called the United Black Youth League. There were others in Bradford as resilient, and in like the Asian Youth Movement, the Indian Workers Association, Bradford Black.
Yeah, I do.
There were many other organizations in this city as there were in other cities up and down the country.
Sorry, so how many people were in this United Black Youth League?
We were in many dozens. We'd only been around for a little while before we were
In the same
arrested.
community?
No, we were Africans, we were Asians, we had Caribbean, we had men, we had
Okay.
Muslims, Hindus, Sikhs, Christians.
Okay.
Ours was for us, the idea of black was based on the commonality of oppression, not on the depth of the pigment of brownness. For us, black didn't exist. And in fact, conversely, white didn't exist.
Yeah.
What existed
Human.
were two political colors, not humans, two political colors.
Oh.
The political, hence I said it was whiteness that was based on power, it was blackness that was based on resistance. And in a sense, history spoke for us in those languages, right the way through of the Afro-Asian anti-colonial movements. There was an inbuilt inner unity amongst us all. So we were part of this organization. We said, no, skinheads will not march through Bradford. In the end, we made petrol bombs. But in the end, the skinheads didn't come. We didn't use any petrol bombs. Nothing actually happened. But we were also active in multitude number of campaigns. The last campaign we were done here in Bradford was, I think he was a Caribbean worker called Gary Pemberton. He had been arrested by the police who had harassed him and charged him with harassment. And we didn't really follow many of the code of conduct. We published the name of the policeman. We said this is not acceptable. We won the case. So we actually never lost a campaign. And I can't think of my other friends and colleagues who were involved in other organizations ever losing a case when we fought.
Sorry, I'm going to go back to the arrest because there are questions like how did the police know that there were petrol bombs? How did they know that that area had made petrol bombs? Because, I mean, do you want to tell us about
Yeah,
it?
the petrol bombs were found in a crate
Oh,
by a
okay.
caretaker. The pertinent question is, why did the police make a mountain out of a molehill? Nothing was used, okay? Because they wanted to primarily get me off the street, get another fella called Talochan Ora off the street. They wanted to smash the organization. And also, you have to look at where we are. This was the era of the mass murderer, the so-called Yorkshire Ripper. They'd made a botch of this thing. This was an era in which they didn't recognize anything called racist violence. And in a sense, what and also for the police, it's very difficult to accept the right of a group or a community for armed self-defense, because that's what we then argued in the courtroom. That actually there was a time they very clearly raised a point: if you acquit these young men, what sort of world are you going to live in? And I can understand the prosecution's point from there. And we retorted to that firstly, we are not terrorists, but victims of terror. And secondly, if you acquit us and we're faced with a similar situation, we'll do it again.
Oh, wow. Because at the end of the day, you're self-defending yourself. You're self-defending, which is actually not bad.
Well, the anti-colonial movement is self-defense, because colonization, they not just took our land, our labor, our resources.
Yes.
They colonized not only our mind, but also our imagination. So when we stand up for ourselves, we're fighting not simply for that particular battle, but we were very conscious that ours is an historical struggle, that the struggle in Bradford is not simply the struggle for Bradford. Look at it the other way around. Had they convicted us, we would have gone down for life to 44 years.
Yes.
But then what sort of world would you be living in today? You mean you don't have a right to defend yourself? if a man comes at you and attacks you with a knife, what are you going to do? Defend yourself with a pen? We said no.
No.
If they come at us with knives,
How
we
old were
then,
you?
yeah.
How old were
I
you?
would have been in my early 20s.
Wow.
So,
And the
yeah.
other people in the.
The youngest, I think, was 17, and the oldest was 25, I think.
Wow.
How did the other groups react to this?
Which groups?
Because you said that there was the Asian Youth Movement, the United Black Youth League. I mean, your group was attacked. Did they relax, or did they also still?
No, sadly, formerly the Asian Youth Movement in Bradford, which I also formed, did not support our campaign, but as an organization, but all their individuals, we were very close friends as well. One of them was arrested, the late Anwar Kadir. He was a prolific anti-racist fighter. In fact, he fought against. I went to visit him in Leeds Hospital, and right up until his, a few months before his death, he was still having to argue against petty racism. But so a lot of them stood with us, but we had tens of thousands of people supporting, not in ones and twos.
Right.
Had that support not come, I wouldn't be sitting with you today,
Sure, sure.
or certainly not in this capacity.
And like the questions I've asked, okay,
Sorry.
okay. Are you liking the questions so far?
It's fine, it's not about liking.
Dami, you have some experiences you want to share with us. Fast forward, don't worry, we're going to come back to 2023, 2022. Ikra, I'm just going to ask you a basic question. As a local student, what was your experience growing up? Not now, but after.
Yeah, that's fine.
So it cut out after every 30 minutes.
Yes.
Okay.
Ready?
Okay, yes.
Hold on, sorry.
Ask me for examples of then and now, and I'll give you some funny ones.
Okay.
Because it's got very heavy at the moment.
Examples of.
Just day-to-day
Sin-
street racism.
Okay.
If we
Dami
consider,
has. Oh, she has some examples also.
we all have them.
Okay.
you know.
I'll ask. I'm just going to ask like what the government role was and the response with what happened with your arrest. What was the government's response? That's the next question.
Okay, shall we go?
Yes.
Have you?
Good, Reverend.
And so Tariq, what was the role and response of the government with your arrest?
I think if it was up to them, they'd have locked us up and thrown the key away, because we were always campaigning against the government. And for us, it didn't matter if it was Labour or Tory. We believed they were both the same. In fact, we used to have a slogan, Labour, Tory, both the same, both play the racist game.
That's good. Punchline.
What are you chanting that back then? Chanting it like, ooh.
Actually, we had many. It's the slogans of the chants of the demonstrations are the poetry of the people in struggle, because they're rhymes, they are little stories. We believed in black people have a right, and the next part was here to stay and here to fight, because we were fighting for not just physical life from
Sure.
racist violence, but we were also fighting for the right of a life of dignity.
I'm excited that you were able to achieve something. I mean, look at the example you gave now. If it was not for you, or if it was not for your type of set, your group, how would we, the new generation, how would we fight for ourselves? I mean, look at back then, if no one had stood up for us, it would be difficult for us now to fight for ourselves. And we have you and all of you.
No, but we are. I mean, me and my friends and comrades and colleagues, and again, we were in thousands.
Yeah, you said
We
so.
were also standing in the shoulders of the people who'd struggled before us. Had the anti-colonial movement not been fighting and dying in Africa and Asia, Britain would never have stopped stealing from those places. They didn't leave because they suddenly felt, oh, let's go back to England. They were kicked out in one way, shape, or another. So, in a sense, we were very conscious that the generation before us, and I will say to the young students who listen, we also believed that students could be the spark that could lead to organizations and revolutionary movements, that we can change the world, that we can build a better world. Now, the world may be a lot worse in many ways than what it was then, but we had a dream. And so long as you can hold on to a dream of a better world, you can't go wrong
True.
because there's no other way to
True.
live.
Tariq, I'm going to say this because fast forward to 2023, a lot of people say that there seemed to be somewhat of terrorism mentality, territory mentality. That's the word, not
Territorial.
terrorism. Sorry, territory mentality. With now the Asians.
Sorry, you stick that part again.
Okay,
So you see.
fast forward. So I'm going to ask this. Fast forward to 2023. A lot of people think that there seems to be a territory mentality with the Asians now. Um, of course, people like you and or thousands of other people have fought for this for them, and it looks like now that the Asians have somehow taken over Bradford. Do you think that's happening?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Because Bradford is not Manningham and Leeds Road and the inner city ghetto.
Hmm.
This is a reflection, if of poverty. And the Asians don't exist, just like the Caribbeans don't exist. The Arabs don't exist. What exists are people from different parts of the world, different components. I think that there isn't and never has been, in a sense, our communities are formed and reformed. We live like language. It's spoken, it dies, it's reborn. So one of the things is that yes, there are Asians, but there are Indians, Pakistanis, Kashmiris, Bangladeshis. It's not one homogeneous block. Okay?
In past years now, there seems to be a huge influx of black students, Africans, and I feel like um, we are, or because I'm from Nigeria, and I feel like coming to the United Kingdom or coming to Bradford, there is now this everywhere we go to, like everywhere you go to, there is definitely an Asian who is there or a Pakistani who's there who is um selling something to you or who's the owner of the organization, and we now seem to feel like, oh, or the Africans seem to feel that it looks like now they've made so much wealth and so much businesses and so much organizations for themselves. Do you think that this happened because of the huge influx of Asians to the United Kingdom, or do you think that how do you why do you think this happened?
Well, firstly, I would look at it completely differently to your position. Firstly, there are antagonistic contradictions amongst people who live in the ghetto. Let's take that. It doesn't matter who that is. Poverty produces its own contradictions. Then there are historically evolved uh, discriminations, if you like,
Yes.
within the ghettos. Bradford, when I look at this city and I look at London, this is damn poor, damn poor in comparison
Oh
to the
wow.
rich parts of the world. You know, that if you look at when we came, this was a city, there was a mill on every corner. There were factories, there was recruitment drives. So if you then live from that historical era where they couldn't get enough workers to come and work in the mills and factories to a position today, you go try looking for a job with some degree of security and stuff. You ain't getting one. You'll be lucky to drive a taxi or being pushed into the gangs and so
Sure,
on.
sure.
So my view to that thing is that actually what has kept Africans and Asians down, it's not themselves, but the power structures that are above us. Now,
Oh
if
yeah.
we want to think that our battle is between us, then we are doomed.
No
Okay?
way.
The only way we can think is that if somebody causes you grief because you're an African, slap him on the face. That's your right. Okay? But without building a unity between those of us who are at the bottom,
We're going
there
to
is
lose
no way.
it.
So when we were growing up, my first novel, which you referred to at the beginning, the reason I wrote it, they said Asians were the children of corner shopkeepers. How many of us could have been corner shopkeepers' children? I worked in a mill. Okay, my other colleagues worked in a wire factory. Another one worked in a carpentry factory. The reality of our economic existence was totally on a lopside, on another side, to the projection of the mass media. So, in a sense, there are revolutionary Africans, there are revolutionary Asians, there are reactionary, backward looking Africans, and so too of Asians of different way and form. And in fact, even the concept of what makes an African an Asian, it's really problematic. You know, who's who and what's what. Where do we begin? By our oppressions? That certainly makes sense, but if I don't care about those who make a lot of money as shopkeepers, or because I know an awful lot of people who have nothing, can't find enough work in this city. My friends who I go and see, and their children are unemployed. And there's a generation coming about because the industry has gone. So I don't know which year you came here, but really there was a time when we came to do the mills when they were working 8 hour at night, 8 hour a day. We added another 8 hours in. We ran them 24
24
hours a
hours.
day.
Wow.
The economic wealth that our migrants produced was phenomenal. When a child is born and up to the age of 18, how much does a family in Africa or Asia spend on raising that child? If that child turns up on British doorsteps as a migrant, labor cannot be illegal. Labor is a form of energy.
True.
Okay? When we turned up here to work, our families paid for us to be grown up, not this country. It's about £100,000 or so if we do the economics. So we actually contributed far more
Yeah.
to this
More.
society
Oh,
than
definitely.
makes the sense. So always,
Sure.
we can look at some of the negativisms, and there's plenty of them. Yeah.
Sure.
But Bradford has become a metaphor for intolerance, in a sense. And where I live in Beirut, that's a metaphor for violence. If you think about the words and how they're used in the English language, neither of these two things could be further from the truth.
Amazing. I'm going to go to you, Ikra. You are a local student, and I mean, how as
Before I go to
I'm going to go to you, Ikra. You're a local student. Please don't let me stop. I'm losing the vibe. I'm going to go to you, Ikra. You're a local student. How has the experience been for you, growing up?
Well, so my dad was part of the generation that told me about all of the injustices that happened, and he told me about the skinheads when I was growing up and stuff. And I grew up a lot more privileged than my father and the generations before me, because they put the work in to kind of try to get rid of the racism. And I don't know if it's ever gonna completely go, but I was lucky to grow up in an area where people were very tolerant of one another. Well, like at school, one of my best friends was a black boy. I was an Asian girl, but it didn't really matter, because especially when we were children, you didn't see that, you saw past it. He was my friend, his name was Chuka, my name was Ikra, that's all that mattered. But I think growing up though, you can't act like it doesn't exist. Like you can't act like there isn't racism in parts. And I think recently as a SAB, we've seen it here and there, and this is why we've had so many conversations behind closed doors about how to get rid of this us and them type of divide, because we can't act like that divide doesn't exist. And I think for the students coming in, whether they're from the Asian backgrounds or from the black community, they're feeling it, and we need to try to get rid of that. And I think that's what I liked so much about your story, that you didn't differentiate between the communities. You were just like, okay,
We're all
yeah,
fighting this
we're all fighting
power
the same
structure.
thing, yeah. And I think that's what I think the union needs to do moving forwards. We need
But
to
have you heard cases of people come to report to you?
yeah. So we do have people come to us, and there's black students coming to us, and there's Asian students, and that's why we've so many times behind closed doors the SABs have talked about this and how to kind of try to mitigate it and to prevent it. And it's not always a clear answer. It's not always a easy answer, because it's sometimes it's down to the individual person how they
Yeah.
treat other people.
Yeah.
It's no matter how much we try to push an agenda of respect and having like love for one another, we can't always push that agenda. It's not. But what we can try to do is create a inclusive and a tolerant environment, and to educate people, which is hopefully
Yeah.
what
this
Dami's
is
set
about.
out to do.
Dami, you are the black student officer. You had like tons of experiences with people who have been I don't want to say racially abused. That's not the word. Who has been angered. Can you share some of the experiences with us?
To be fair, like I said, I think the first step is, knowing what it is exactly. How people come to me with different kind of situations. I'm also learning because I haven't lived in an environment where, I recently moved to the UK. I've always been in Nigeria. So back home, it was more of tribal, which is a story for another day. Yeah. So, so coming here, I mean, like Ikra said, we know these things exist. We've read it in papers. We've had people share stories. So,
Yes.
I mean, I've had people come up to me and say, "Oh, this happened," and the most popular ones are, the one that happens on the bus, on trains, and they say things like, "Oh, I'm sitting on the train, there's a seat next to me, and the guy just looks at me funny, and then he just walks away." And and then we all just try to make him feel, yeah, did you want to sit next to you? That's fine. At least, there was one weird one that happened, and this lady said the other lady literally spat, on the floor next to her, and then she walked away. I know that was just disgusting.
Wow.
I mean, she looked everywhere and she just saw that. I mean, she was obviously she just expressed this disgust for a black person sitting down there, and then she couldn't get a seat, and then instead of just walking away, which was just as bad, she literally spat that and then walked away. And I'm trying to imagine if it was me, maybe I was already having a bad day, or maybe I'm excited about something, and someone just walks up to me and just spits because they don't feel like I'm deserving of that space.
Terrible,
It's
terrible,
just
terrible.
wrong. So that happens quite a number of times. And with what you asked Tariq earlier, and you were saying something about the territorial mentality. I've had a lot of black students also report to me about stuff like that. In fact, one happened just yesterday. I had the opening ceremony at the HM yesterday, and I saw some black students sitting at fun. I'm like, why are you not joining us? And then he said he wasn't interested, and I'm like, okay, what happened? And then he pointed over to another table where he had some I don't know. I don't want to assume anything. Some other students that are not black, and then he was like, the table was empty, and then they okay they were sitting on the table like the way we are right now, and then they were all together, black people, other people. So their other friends came, and then they were looking at them funny to stand up, like they were speaking to each other in their own language, expecting them to leave, and they were making weird faces at them, and 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 I'm like, so I said, what did you do in that instance? I said, of course, he stood his ground. He didn't get up, but he got to a point, just, he just felt really uncomfortable, which is what they wanted to do. They made him feel uncomfortable. And then he got up eventually to get another seat. So those are the kind of like microaggressions that happen that I feel like people should be aware of. And I'm happy he handled it well. He said he was really upset and was really angry, was going to like say something, but he just didn't want to, excuse me, escalate the whole matter and, that. And I said, okay, fine. And this is exactly what this campaign is all about. You know, try to. I mean, it's also what Ikra said. It's about being the individual. I have loads of white friends, loads of Asian friends, and I won't mince words here. I've never had that experience before. I've been in the UK for over a year now. Not once has anybody ever made me feel, I don't belong here or anything.
Uncomfortable.
Yeah, which is ironic because I'm the black students officer and I have people come to report to me, all this kind of thing. So I feel like, I mean, you can't tell who's gonna do it to you, and you can't say you're not gonna walk in that direction because you feel, oh, that person's gonna be
Sure.
that kind of way towards me. But also another thing that happens is in the classrooms as well. We've had reports of where staff members, I was speaking to Andy, and Andy says, "Oh, the staff is just going to be another discussion for another day rather, because, have students not want to take a class because the way the lecturer reacts to them, the way they talk to them, all those kind of things, and it's just endless, basically,
Crazy,
honestly.
crazy. Tariq also was saying that he had examples of racial expressions, or examples of is it micro? I'm using
Microaggression.
aggression. I'm using your term now, microaggression. You had some examples, some cases.
Well, I'll give you a slight lighter end of the story. I've been punched in the nose, I've been punched in the face, kicked, groined, the whole lot. So I don't know this microaggressions or what
Oh,
have you.
she's
Spat at,
determined it.
spat at, denied jobs, denied all sorts of stuff.
Yeah,
And
especially
so
denied
have many
jobs.
of my
Yeah.
friends. The important point for all of us was that these things are wrong and they
Yeah,
happen.
yeah.
And we're not going to stop them. And we took a decision. Our job was to educate ourselves in our history, the history of resistance, which no university will give us. And because we were engaged in trying to learn what happened to us, we began to understand how to relate to each other as well, to understand the common denominators. We studied Malcolm X, we studied, in the university's Great Hall and in the student union buildings, we had no offices, we had no funding. In fact, we opposed funding. We had no full time workers. Yet we could fill 11 coaches if need be.
Wow.
Yet,
Yeah.
we could go out. We had petty criminals. Our job was, why are you petty criminals? Who taught you to thief? Your parents weren't. Your history isn't. But coming on to lots of things, that there is racialism, in my opinion. You don't have to agree with me, and there is racism. Okay? There are individual acts that people do which can be nasty, there's no question of it, that can discriminate against each other. But racism is an historically evolved ideology used for the enslavement of Africa, used for the colonization of Africa, used for the colonization of Asia, and used to maintain a rule in this country. So, what might break this country apart isn't the anti racist struggle, racism welds it together. It's, there's no way out of this. It's in every brick that you see, or
Wow.
certainly I see. When I look at nice buildings, I say, where did they come from? Why haven't we got them? I can see colonial plunder. So, one of the processes that we did, we were not within institutions, but we had educationals to try to understand. Now, old racism has not gone away, a new one is now striding. And it's not anti Semitism is bad, but in this very city, we had anti Zionist Jews who stood on the principle that Zionism was racist, fundamentally racist. You cannot be anti Zionist, anti racist, and not anti Zionist. You can't support apartheid in one part, you can't support the supremacy of one religious group in one part of the world and not the other. I've never supported Islamic supremacy. Damn, I will be supporting Jewish
Sure.
supremacy in Israel.
Sure.
Not at all. We never did. Now, because we didn't, the teams of people that came to us were also like us, progressive. But we also welcomed white people, don't take it wrong. Progressive white people, anti racist white people. So the old racism, the straight, nasty, black, white, the one top down, which feeds the society. Just because Sunak, we had coconuts all across Africa and Asia. That's how they maintained the empire. That's all these people are. It doesn't matter what their skin color is. So let me.
Yes, I know also that you had to move to Birmingham as part of your
I was exiled from Bradford when
bail
bail
conditions.
conditions. They threw
Um,
me out.
do
Yeah.
you think there'll be a time in Bradford where everyone will get along, the white and the black? There would be no us versus them versus us.
I think until we have communities who want to be like that,
Yeah.
there is never going to be a time when there aren't conflicts within ethnic groups, racial groups, religious groups. It won't happen. That's what these things are for. What's most important is to have a community of people who stand above that, who unite on the commonality of oppression and say, hang on a minute, our oppressors, who are they? If you
Let's
don't
face
know who
them.
your oppressor is, you've got no chance of fighting your oppression. So the old racism hasn't gone away. The new one has come into being. Remember, we were charged with terrorism offenses, nothing less. If somebody is charged with terrorism today, people cross the street, they're so terrified.
Yeah.
I've had friends come to my house so terrified following the raids on their street, they unplugged my telephone, turned theirs out simply to talk to me. I made the following comment on a Facebook page. Do you think I'm going to get arrested? So the
Oh.
era of today is an era in which actually there's a serious one of our my friend's sons did 12 years in jail for bringing a CD, was it CD or something from Pakistan. So my point is this:
Wow.
if I can take you back to 1976, I'll give you a little example. I was in Manningham Park. Have you ever been to that lovely park?
Yes.
Yeah, I used to live near there. And that itself is a colonial legacy. You know, God didn't suddenly throw the park over here. Somebody did.
Yeah.
Somebody made money from somewhere. So I was wandering around in the park, and this white boy came up to me and he said, "Oi, mate, can you speak some Paki?" And, you know, now this boy is actually not being nasty. Not boy, he was my age, you know.
Okay.
Or might have been a little younger than me, and I was quite young as well. And he says, you know, I swore at him as I get lost. And he says, no, no, I want to hear some Paki. And I think I swore at him in Punjabi, if I'm mistaken. And he left. You know, he wasn't trying to beat me up, attack me. His mates were there. They had a laugh. So that's 1976. My son came in Manchester, and he'd been in a park called Platfields Park in 2016. I think it was, or maybe because I remember the two dates. There was a 6 in it. And he says, "Dad," I said, "What?" He goes, "These kids got to me and they said, 'Can you speak some Muslim?' And I said, 'What do you mean?' He says, 'No, honestly, they weren't trying to be aggressive, and they just said, 'Can you speak some Muslim?' And I said, 'What did you do?' He goes, 'I went boom, boom.' So his answer was better than mine from the years back. My point being that if we learn to negate the negatives, I mean, my son did it instinctively in one sense and gave me a great story, which I sort of recited a few times. So the old racism has not gone away. Islamophobia has come
Yeah.
into being.
Yes.
So what actually is the danger in these societies is the victimization of the minorities as being the cause of the problems in society. It's not us lot who are doing the downgrading the National Health Service. It's their system. They want to cut 50 million every year. It's not the minorities who are closing the factories down, who close the mills down. It's the whole economic system in which brought us here in the first place. So in a sense, our problems are no more simple racial issues, but one of the lackings, unless we can connect anti-racism with anti-imperialism, you know, we're not going to make sense of what's going on. We'll end up, you know, we used to call them the saris, samosas, and steel band mentality, that we will look at the cultural aspects without understanding that actually they are deeply interconnected, and every day that interconnection is reborn, and you can see it in 100 different things, from the migrants coming to Britain, from the poverty down the road, from the types of students that will be here, the way that you will be taught education. Now, our other thing was, it really doesn't matter who sits at the top.
I wanted to ask,
Sorry.
because I know that lots of students have asked these questions also. When you're racially abused, is there like somewhere where you can report, and can you get justice for being racially abused?
Well, I can't give you a legal answer. You know,
Okay.
you seem to be asking that. If you're racially abused, organized and fight back. Now,
Yeah.
there
Boom,
isn't
boom, boom.
there isn't another way. Why do you think we had black fists? There is no other way.
Sure.
And the fight back, once you begin to fight back, you can never lose because you can't fight back with the belief I'm going to lose. You
Yeah,
fight
yeah,
back
with
because
everything.
I'm going to win.
I feel like a lot of people don't know this, and that's why you've had like so many cases, Dami. I feel like a lot of people just report, and because they don't think that they can do anything. Um, it depends on the type of person you are. Some people are so in their space, they don't want to talk back at you, while some people would literally just blast you. And that's why we need to raise this awareness for everyone to know that you can do something about it, so that before you start to report to a black student officer or to a sabbatical officer, you can directly defend yourself at that spot. And a lot of people also say that it gives you Dami, we had this conversation one time about the mental states, because someone gets abused today, and you, Ikra, also, someone may have reported to you and probably goes back home, and they're still affected by it. It has happened a lot of times. Do you guys have any examples to share of someone who was reported to you and probably has been mentally down because of that?
I mean, I feel like anyone who is on the receiving end of some type of hate, it does get to them. I don't have any particular examples that I could share
Yeah.
because some of these are quite private.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
You
So
don't
they
want
don't. Yeah.
to. You
But
don't.
the how do I put it now? The it doesn't affect you if you immediately talk back. Well, coming back to students, because I mean they are the ones that we're doing this for. So I feel like if you immediately talk back at them and if you immediately defend yourself, it's easy on you mentally. Am I correct?
I couldn't speak for everyone
Yeah, I
on
think
that
it
one.
depends
I
on the
think it's
person.
yeah.
Well, some for me, let me use myself as an example. I feel like it a lot of factors to consider. It depends on what, where, also. If if it happened to me, I mean, like, if I'm having a really bad day, or I'm having, I'm just feeling some type of way, and someone comes at me and it's, something very obvious. So it really depends. I don't know how I would react, to be honest with you. I
Okay.
can't say for sure how I would react.
Ikra, do you think that there's something that the university can do to help support people who are being racially abused?
So yeah, there's all sorts of support services in place. I mean, one of the first ones you can come to is UBU Advice, and then we can take you from there and see where else we can take you. If you feel like it's on campus and you feel like you want to put a formal complaint in, there's a formal complaint procedure, and again, UBU Advice will talk you through it. So your first part of contact should be UBU Advice. We have a really big centre of inclusion and diversity under Professor Udi Achibong. So we've got those things in place. We do have these opportunities to speak up. I know, Dami, are you doing a panel?
Yeah. There's gonna be a panel next week.
And the police are going to
Yeah, plus they're gonna be there as well.
So opportunities like that, and we'd love for like more students to get involved, to encourage us to do more events like that, and to support us doing those types of things. So yeah.
I think it's just half and half. Like, sometimes I feel like students, because during the Black History Month in October, a couple of students were on the panel and they were really excited about talking about their experiences, and I feel like there'll be obviously some people who would just rather get it over with and not talk about it and just move on from it. But yeah, I feel like the university has a huge role to play with this, and they should make it. I mean, people talk to me, they talk to the SABs, but I feel like if people understand that the university is there whenever this kind of things happen, it might also help. And maybe people who are also at the giving end, just get some kind of consciousness as to, what you're doing especially while you're on campus. Of course, things might happen at work, or on the street, or on the road,
But don't bring that to
yeah,
campus.
exactly. So while you're on here, you just leave all of that behind, and it's not acceptable and it's not welcome here. So the university definitely has, and I feel like this is a good place to start. So like more of these campaigns we should roll this out more often than we do right now. That's a good place to start.
Thank you so much, Tariq, for talking to us today.
Yeah.
Also, I know you have books, and I know that, especially Ants in the Sun, I would love to read it. How can people get to access your books?
Well, Hand on the Sun is going to be republished this year.
Oh,
I mean, I've got a few, it's in process because it's out of print now and it's very expensive on the internet. It's hundreds of pounds. And it should be out this year. But the for people, for your students to keep in mind, is that Bradford 2025 will be releasing a film on the Bradford 12
Oh.
by then, and we'll also
good.
we'll also have a book by that time, and there is a move with the Bradford University to make a play on that process on the Bradford 12, and it's important that it's not about 12 people, it's about an historical era that produced us and the situation we found ourselves in. So we're not sort of doing hero worship or anything like that, but actually trying to capture moments from that history. And if some of your students are related to the film, probably in the summer, if we manage, we may well be holding a workshop here for those people who might be interested in working with us on animation and things like that. But that's yet to come. We're just finalizing the schedule for that.
We are looking forward to Bradford.
Definitely. We are excited about-
2025.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Tariq Mehmood
Thank you.
Ali. He is an associate professor at the American University Beirut. He's had his PhD at the Lancaster University. Tariq was first known for his first novel, And on the Sun, that dealt with the experience of the resistance to racism by young migrants to the United Kingdom in the 1970s and the 1980s. He has since then written several novels like While There Is Light, You're Not Proper, and The Song of Gozarina, and many others in the works. He's also a filmmaker and a co-director of the award-winning documentary film Injustice. Thank you so much, Tariq, for joining us. Thank you so much, Dami.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ikra.
Thank you. Such an experience. Love having you here.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Um,
Thank you.
It's such a mind-blowing experience,
Yeah.
and eye-opener. I've never heard of so many things that you said today,
Yeah.
and I'm just going to go on and digest it.
Yeah, honestly. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank
so
you very
much.
much. Well,
Yes,
it's a
so-
process, isn't it?
Yeah, we'll get there eventually.
All right, my name has been Cynthia. Thank you for joining us.
All right. Thank
Yeah.
you now. I'm free now, yes?
Yes,
Good.
you are.
I better send a message to my friend who's been ringing and he couldn't get through.
Good
Oh.
pictures. Okay, we're ready. I'm ready for one.
What are you doing?
How do you
We want to do a group photo.
Oh, okay.
How do you save this?
Fine, download it.